All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I'm your host, Damon Postolka. And with me today, I have Lori McDonald from Brilliance Business Solutions. Brilliance Business. See, I tongue tied a little bit, but I think I got it out right.
You got it. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Damon.
I am too. I am too. I mean, I am just, it is cool to have you on because your background, what you're doing now, helping people with their digital commerce and for manufacturers and really showing them the way to make it easier for their customers.
Yes.
Yeah. So Lori, let's start with your background. Let's talk a little bit about your college, your degree kind of thing, and then work into, what brought you to where you're at today.
Yeah. So my story, I went to Purdue in computer electrical engineering. And what most people remember about me is that I ended up as a flight controller at NASA Johnson Space Center for the space shuttle program. Through an internship at Purdue, I started working as a co-op student at NASA and then eventually worked there full time when I graduated from college. I ended up meeting my husband there. He also was an engineering student at Purdue. He also was a flight controller at NASA. And so we lived in Houston, Texas for a few years. My husband actually ended up going to work for Rockwell Automation out of a field office in Houston, Texas originally. And then he had a job promotion that brought us to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to Rockwell's headquarters here in Milwaukee, which is where I'm at today. My husband and I both grew up in the Midwest, so this was closer to home.
Nice.
And so that was in 1998. We ended up relocating to Milwaukee, and I was trying to figure out what could be as cool as space. And so ended up deciding to start a web development company because, there's not a space program in Wisconsin. And the web's a pretty amazing place to be. The internet in 1998, it was a lot different than it is now.
Yeah.
And it kind of decided based on my technical background and also my husband's experience at Rockwell. My husband Dave managed the largest data warehouse at Rockwell Automation. So their point of sale database for all of Rockwell's distributors.
Wow.
And so we were kind of uniquely equipped to understand the complexities that exist for manufacturers and distributors with data. And when a lot of organizations get into web development, agencies get into web development, they didn't necessarily have that technical expertise, especially on the B2B side.
Yeah.
And so that became our niche at Brilliance, is focusing on helping manufacturers and distributors implement e-commerce. And my husband left his job at Rockwell 10 years ago, and now he leads our development team. And we've grown. We made the Inc. 5000 list last year.
Nice.
So yeah, this is a lot of fun. I love, and this is a really fun business, helping manufacturers and distributors who haven't previously sold online figure out how that strategy helps them grow their business.
Yeah. It's just such an interesting space too, because I think that the other thing that's happening too is the tools to do this are getting easier, more affordable, and more mainstream.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, when you look at, so we've been in business for like 23 years.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, everything we were building, from scratch, pretty much. We were writing code for all of it. And now that there's really great tools that, are many kind of off the shelf tools that you can use that really help the process and make it easier for development teams, but also, to your point, make it less expensive for customers.
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit because I got to talk about the NASA flight controller thing for a second.
Sure.
So, there's multiple people that are on the flight control team, I'm sure. Lots.
Yes.
So was there a specific part? I mean, were you watching a set of the conditions that you're watching and this is what you're focused on? How did that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was on the INCO team, which stands for Instrumentation and Communications. So we were in charge of the communication between the space shuttle and the ground and the data. And so my first job when I was on the team was as a datacom, which was in charge of, basically there were, data recorders on board the space shuttle that you always had to make sure that one of them was running to record, kind of when you think about like a black box on an airplane, make sure data is being recorded in case there's an interruption in communication with the ground. We've got the data recorded. We can play back later. So I got to send commands to the space shuttle. In the INCO group, we're the only group that could send commands to the space shuttle. So that's a pretty cool job. Yeah. And then eventually I worked as an instrumentation officer, which is where you watch sensors and data, so that if all of a sudden a bunch of sensors start to report low, like it might be because there's a circuit failure somewhere and that data is not giving you good, accurate information. So that was but to your point, it's a team. That was one of the, when I started there, I was, a sophomore in college when I
Yeah.
started at NASA.
Yeah.
I got to work with people that have been there since the Apollo program, just
Oh, wow.
amazing, extremely talented. Everyone I worked with there was so talented. And you really get to know what it's like to work on a team of really excellent people. And also like what it's like to need to be able to, give an answer quickly and have to train and prepare to really be, we run a lot of simulations. The fun thing is now looking back, there's a lot of kind of similarities between what I do today and what I did then. We still have practice. We practice a launch before we actually take a website live. We come up with contingency plans for if something goes wrong with a website rollout. The stakes are much lower.
Yes.
Our clients may not think so, but the stakes are lower with what the work we do today than with them for space shuttle flights. But anyway, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. No doubt. And I've just got to imagine the amount of data that you want to collect in something like that. And then too, just the simple fact of how do you communicate at something that's moving that fast with something that's moving that fast too. And
Sure.
There's just all kinds of challenges when you get down into it.
Yeah. Well, and, the technology, it wasn't really high tech, really. I mean, the space shuttle, right? It was really old technology. And so really what's pretty amazing is the spatial team did really amazing work. And a lot of that was based on systems and processes that were set up and repeated. There was a lot of training that went into preparing to ensure, to your point, like there's a limited amount, like even in terms of like talking between team members that could happen on the ground. We had a back office room that I was in that supported a front office that you see, a front room that you see. Like on Apollo 13, you see the front room of people that are sitting out there, but they had a whole back room of operators that were supporting them. So it's just really interesting to see how all of those systems work together to create, to support spaceflight. And then just to think in that in terms of like how effective systems really work together.
Yeah. Well, that's a great experience too, because when you're looking in what you're doing, working on what you're doing now, I mean, you might have a website that's interacting with the ERP system that's connected to the CRM, that's connected to some sort of payment system or a bank or whatever you're running things through. So you have a lot of dissimilar systems that you need to make work together.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things I learned that they taught us in simulations, we would have experiences where something would go wrong. You want things to go wrong in the simulations so they don't go wrong, or so you know what to do if something goes wrong in a real flight. But what a lot of our training was around was like when something goes wrong, like how to troubleshoot, right? How to think through, like, is what it looks like is wrong actually what is wrong, or could it be something else?
Yeah.
And I think those kinds of problem solving skills are, to your point, when you've got all these interrelated systems speaking to each other, are directly applicable to the work that I and my team do today.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. It's great. And like you said, that experience carries forward. So you decided to start Brilliance. You're doing that. And did you start out in manufacturing and distribution or did you kind of just start out building websites, doing that kind of stuff?
We would build websites for whomever would pay us, a dentist office, friends of my parents, whomever, that's the way most small businesses start, right?
Yeah.
And then we realized, my background was in engineering, not in marketing or advertising or design. And so like when you think of a website, a lot of companies that are in web development, especially, in 98, websites looked a lot different than they do now, but a lot of them were more on the marketing side.
Yeah.
And so what I realized earlier, I written an article on how to accept credit cards online and published that online. And then a manufacturer that was in New York and Pennsylvania, they found the article, and they, the story they told me was that they found 100 companies, they narrowed it down to 3, and they picked us. Part of it probably was at the time, I think I was cheaper than a lot of the other options they were looking at.
Okay.
But one of the reasons that they picked us was because of my technical experience, technical background, and because they had some really and this is true a lot of the customers we worked with. Their ERP was a legacy system. They had inventory on index cards that
Oh,
not all their
wow.
data was in their
Yeah.
ERP, and they had this really complex pricing setup, and they wanted to sell products online. And they had these really big corporate accounts that their salespeople took orders for, but they wanted to start selling to smaller accounts, and they thought, the web could help them.
Yeah.
And what we realized in our work for that customer was that they were really an ideal account for us because it really played to my strengths technically and our understanding of data and data integrations. And so then, like in many instances, we realized what worked and then we looked for more of it and found that we
Yeah.
really could build an effective vertical there for us.
Yeah, that's awesome because it is. I tell you, when you look across the manufacturing base, there's so many choices in ERP systems or inventory or whatever they're using. It just there's so many different choices and little niche ones, even in industries like could be for sheet metal or CNC machining or something like that. There's a real popular industry choice for some reason,
Yeah.
and I've got to believe that makes it more challenging when you're trying to connect the web and any digital kind of inside of a business like that.
Yeah, I mean, for many of we've been in this a while, so we will come across, an ERP that we're integrating with that we've done before.
Yeah.
But also a lot of companies are on older systems.
Yes.
That's a pretty common thing for us to come across, which means, and depending on how that system is set up, it may not be the easiest thing to integrate with. So, that's just been really great experience. We've had to, we're not really afraid of any of those kinds of situations because we've pretty much worked through in any of those kinds of challenges. And in fact, it's kind of fun now.
Yeah. Good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so now we're sitting here today, we're still in the whatever stage of this pandemic, and it really affected manufacturers and distributors. Well, everyone obviously, but them being traditional. I've got salespeople on the road doing their thing, kind of businesses. What are you seeing some of the manufacturers and distribution companies doing differently now to either enable more digital commerce or make it easier for their people and those kind of things?
Yeah, those are great questions. What's interesting is that for some of our customers who invested in digital ahead of COVID, certainly in their case, they kind of, they saw a real uptick in their digital usage, during COVID, and that ended up being something that really helped them. Like when other forms of communication weren't working, when in-person interactions weren't possible, a lot of people just naturally moved to digital.
Yeah.
But to your point, like also, what's been true is that people are looking for ways to leverage digital tools to enable customers to self-serve, like to reduce the amount of interactions people need to have with a salesperson. And that was happening before COVID. Like that's not just because of the pandemic. It certainly has been accelerated by the pandemic, but some of that is also just generational shifts. People, like younger people, are less likely to want to talk to someone. And also because we have great tools like Amazon and things like that, we're all a little bit less inclined. Like if we can find some way to get the answer ourselves online, we kind of would like to do that in general, if we can, versus talk. And so there's a lot of data out there around how, people in general are going to do a large amount of research before they actually want to speak to a salesperson, whether or not they're actually going to place an order online or whether they will actually place an order with a person. And so a lot of manufacturers are recognizing that trend is happening, and are looking. It depends on what kind of organization they are in terms of how they address it. If you're selling large equipment or a very complex purchase that really needs assistance in the process, it might be that you don't plan for people to place their order online, but you're giving them some tools to submit a request for quote online or to gather information online, or also for your existing customers, providing them with tools to look up their order history, previous purchases, parts reordering, often replacement parts are a really interesting area for manufacturers to move into if they haven't done any digital commerce before, because it's higher margin. And at the end of the day, if we had have a client of ours who was talking about the fact that a salesperson was saying, I no longer have to spend time on the $50 part order. Like, I can spend that time on the $50,000, equipment sale I want to make. And so that's the upside, is that you can be allowing your sales team to be more efficient by leveraging these tools.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. And one of the companies that we work with from time to time, Gen Alpha, with Chris Harrington there in Wisconsin, they've got some pretty exciting things for OEMs. If you're making a snowblower, you're a snowblower company, street sweeper company, lawn tractor company, where we have the bigger supply chains and stuff like that. And that part ordering, even in the businesses that I used to run, we could the margins are nice. As a manufacturer, you may have your own products and have a nice margin on it, but your aftermarket sales and service is much higher margin usually.
Yeah.
And capturing those and making it simple too, not just capturing the margin. Now I'm about that, running businesses and doing what I do, but making it simple for your customers too, because a lot of times customers come back to the manufacturers and it's like, I don't see it in the book. I don't know. I don't see it online. I'm going to have to call somebody. Well, we know how that works anymore. Half the time you don't want to call them, or if you do, it's hard to get a hold of people. And certainly if somebody's doing it out of business hours, it makes it challenging.
Definitely.
And just adding the simplicity of, hey, this is a common part. Go to our parts page and you can get it. It's just one or two things can make a huge difference in how that customer feels about your company.
Yeah, I think about a manufacturer that we worked with that, they had like one person who pretty much was the person that the sales team knew they needed to get a hold of this one person to find out if they had availability for certain products. Like they just didn't have a very good software system internally to give that information. And so if they had, in their case, contractors were out trying to sell their products, but contractors might use a different manufacturer's product if they weren't certain they could get it in time, right? If they weren't certain it was available. So if you had to be able to call in and find out if there was availability, and to your point, if a contractor is putting together a quote and it's off hours, or the person that you need to talk to is on a lunch break, so how much better it is to have inventory information available online if that's important to your customers, and in this case it was. And so, in some cases, like in that case, they didn't actually display the actual number of items in stock because they didn't want to provide that level of visibility, but they more gave an indication visually, like graphically, of how much they had in stock. So you could know if they were low or they had plenty.
Okay.
And so that's what makes this business so interesting, is that every client we work with, how their customers order are a little bit different. There are many things that are the same, but often, different things that have to be adjusted for their customers.
That is so true, because of the different kinds of products and services that they do. You just never know.
Yep. Definitely.
Yeah. Good. So when you're looking at, what are some of the new things that are coming up that are happening now in the market that you're going, wow, this is really, really something?
Oh, there's so much really interesting technology. I mean, one thing I would talk about that isn't really new, but I think a lot of manufacturers and distributors may not think about it, is leveraging content and commerce together. And that's really, so, and this is like in a manufacturer, you've got lots of content usually, right? You have like product spec sheets, and you might have videos about your products and manuals and catalogs. You have all of this content, and finding a way to enable it to be really, and also like ideally you have a marketing team that's creating blogs and other marketing content, if you can find ways to make it really easy online for customers to move between how they're educating themselves about your content, about your products, moving to actually buying products.
Yeah.
Those examples of like parts ordering we were talking about, if someone is doing research on how to fix, some of their equipment, or is doing research on how to use a product of yours, and they can move from that research and education they're doing directly into purchasing a product that they could use, that just helps increase your likelihood of making a sale.
Yeah.
So, and there's actually some technology that helps make that easier to happen. There's machine learning technology that does product recommendations, so that like when you're on a content page, you can see some recommended products next to that content page. There's also now machine learning technology that enables you to see content recommendations, which is kind of a new idea that like you may, for organizations that have a lot of content, you may want to enable them to, you want them to stay on your site and to keep reading, right? And so you can make have suggestions of what other content they would be interested in based on the content they've already read. And what's nice about that is a lot of marketing teams have way more work to do than they have time. So while in theory they could be putting together these like manual recommendations, to have machine learning technology that automates that can be really powerful.
Yeah, because
go ahead.
To think of some of the workflows that would have to happen on recommending that kind of thing, the automated technology to do it would make it much easier.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, there are a lot there, because the complexity as you start going down the rabbit hole, and if they're looking at this, they might want to look at this compared to that, and trying to do those things manually would be rugged.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah. And the another really interesting thing, like there's a lot of talk around having a holistic view of your customer, a 360-degree view of your customer. And so there's technology called the customer data platforms that enables you to bring all of your data on a customer together into one place. So, all of their offline orders, all of their online orders, all of the chat they might have had in your live chat or in your customer service system, having all of that come into one place, or their traffic into a retail store if you have one. So all of that information is in a single system, so that what it really makes really powerful is your marketing team can use that to more effectively understand, identify, and message to those customers to help with various campaigns they might be running, which is really interesting too.
That is cool. That is cool. So when you look at some of the ways people are making things easier, you talked a little bit about finding invoices and being able to look at order histories and other things. What are some of the things you think are really cool to make it easier for people to do business with some of the manufacturers you're working with?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, for in the B2B space, when you think about self-service tools, a lot of companies benefit from having e-commerce software that supports having multiple users that can log in from the same account. And so like traditionally in consumer facing e-commerce, you think, like I log in and place an order for me.
Yeah.
But when you think about a business, often what's really happening is you have multiple people within the company that are placing an order. And it can be beneficial for them to see the entire company's orders, not just my orders, but I also want to see the order that Jeff on my team made. And it may also be that some people on my team, I don't want to give the ability to purchase, but they can create the order and then I approve the purchase. And so those are like purchasing workflows. And so that's functionality that it used to be hard to find that in off-the-shelf products. And the great news is now there are several products on the market that offer those capabilities. So those are good things to look for. Other capabilities, being able to view your invoice history, not just for orders you placed online, but for the orders that your company placed with a salesperson, and actually the ability to pay those invoices online if that's something that you want to do. Also, the ability to submit a request for quote, to have those quotes responded to by a salesperson.
Yeah.
If your sales team is able to turn quotes around faster, that just increases your likelihood of getting the business. So those are a few of the things. There's more, but those are a few.
No, that's, I mean, because what I see and I think is really interesting is the integration of a sales force, an outside sales force, with digital methods to make it more effective, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of manufacturers and distribution companies look at it as a either or, but it's not really. It's an integration. It's like making your sales force smarter, making it easier for them to concentrate on sales,
Yeah,
rather than paperwork or other things like that. And
definitely.
that's the exciting part for me. I mean, I've had Andrew Deutsch has come in and talked about AI for, someone like selling for a company like Fastenal, and just what AI could do, when you have 100,000 SKUs that you sell. But I'm talking to this customer today. How can we use AI to make that salesperson smarter for that customer and give them real tangible, important things to talk about, like, hey, you ordered 2 drums of this 2 months ago, and you've been ordering 2 drums every 2 months. I see you haven't placed an order. Do you need an order for that? Because I don't want you to run out. And that's the kind of stuff that I think that the integration of the two things coming together is really cool. I mean, even in the largest companies, I think they still suffer from the fact that we're still doing business the way, and it's not just manufacturing in an industrial kind of setting. I mean, this is in the medical industry. This is in a lot of other places where they've got very expensive, very talented salespeople that are still shuffling paper, and maybe electronic now, but they're getting an email for an order here and shuffling it to somebody else that's going there. That can be eliminated or at least streamlined by this process.
Definitely. Yeah. And to your point, so many organizations, there's some anxiety, whether it's from leadership or the sales team or somewhere, that if we start selling products online, like usually the story goes something like this, like, our business is as successful as it is because of our sales team. And if we start selling products online, we're gonna undercut our sales team. And how could we do that? Because they're the reason we're as great as we are. But the reality is, to your point, Damon, like, it's not an either or. It's an and. It's a win-win. And so the key is to be able to demonstrate that. We've had customers who, when a customer logs into the site, they see a picture of their salesperson on their account page along with their phone number, and they see a list of their most frequently ordered products. And the really interesting thing that happens is, the customer still can place orders through their salesperson, but they also discover products that they might not have known to ask their salesperson about because they have a site search, and they may have product recommendations and other content they're reading. It actually can help grow the size of that account, and can, depending on how the organization sets up their comp structure, can help that salesperson make more money too.
Yeah.
So it really can be a win-win.
Exactly. I want to take just a moment because Trish was commented a while back, and I missed it because we were going in, but thanks, Trish. Educated customers are the best customers. That's
definitely.
For sure. And if you can help to educate them and they make the decision to buy from you with the education, that's great.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah,
it builds trust. Education builds trust with the customer. That's a part of a relationship that you're creating. When you think about, the other fear I think that exists with digital, with doing business online, is that people perceive, if they start to sell products online, there are much bigger players on the market online that they're competing against. And, the Grangers or the Amazons. How am I going to compete with these really big digital players? And the really interesting thing is that I think the small and mid-market manufacturers and distributors have a really compelling value proposition, because they know, coming back to that concept of education, they know a lot. They have a lot of subject matter
Yeah.
expertise, and Amazon doesn't have subject matter expertise in the products they're selling,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
They're moving
so, yeah,
products. They
right,
move
exactly.
products. That's
They're
what they
just
do.
selling products. And in many instances, customers want some education and support and help around the products they're buying, which is why that education is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. So that's cool because, and as you look at some of the things that I think is super exciting when you're looking at manufacturing and distribution are the availability of configurators now
Yes.
and some of the other technologies that's moving in because we talk about this a lot when we're looking at different things, and the configurators make a custom manufacturer's life so much easier that I'm just excited every time I see a new application of it.
Absolutely. And, think about the time savings that can provide to internal sales and engineering teams, depending on the configurator and the situation. But, time that isn't being spent figuring out on how to set up that quote for a customer because they're able to self-serve is time that you can spend in a more strategic way, growing accounts. So,
Yes.
I haven't ever seen a situation where like people are laid off because digital commerce comes in. It's not like that because finding great salespeople and great customer service people is a really hard thing, right?
Yeah.
It's more like we can repurpose our people into doing some really higher value add activities for organizations and not be doing the more menial tasks that we could be leveraging technology to do for us.
Yeah. Well, and it makes things easier too for
Right.
people. I mean, because when you go back to the situation that you mentioned where someone goes in and sells something online, but they've got a salespeople or salesperson, they've got a
Right.
salesperson in their area, they can deal with that salesperson. Now, what does that salesperson do? Well, they may not have had to go out and get that sale, right? But they certainly can follow up with the customer and make sure that did it work right? Do you have
Right.
all the information you need? And give that human touch that makes that over the top that they couldn't do before because they were trying to get the next sale.
Yep.
And these are the kind of things that I think that we have to refocus our salespeople a little bit too. And like, hey, you don't have to do that anymore because you
Yep.
get to talk to people. You get to go have lunch with somebody because, hey, they just placed a great order online and you need to make sure they're happy with that order. And we need to talk about those kind of things rather than the
Absolutely.
next person that you have to hunt down to find an order as much.
Yeah, it reminds me, one of our clients is a distributor of industrial supplies, and so in their case, when orders are placed for that are existing accounts for their sales team, their sales team gets commission credit for their
Yeah.
existing accounts. But of course, orders come into the website that are new, that have never done
Mm-hmm.
business with the company before. And so then what happens is, they divide those up and send them out to salespeople, to certain salespeople. And to your point, Damon, those salespeople are responsible for following up with that customer, thanking them for their order, and going
Yeah.
through a series of activities that if they do those things, now that customer is tagged as their customer, right? Their account.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it enables our salespeople to move from being like, salespeople aren't order takers.
No.
Salespeople are consultants that help customers buy, that
Yeah.
can be helping them find other products that might be of interest to them. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an awesome way to say that, and that's a great. If people didn't listen to what you just said about how you can get combine an e-commerce sale with a sales force and still give the salesperson credit for that sale, the next sales coming up. That's a great way to do it. Just have them go out and establish a relationship after the initial sale. Make sure that things are going like they need to be, so that any new sales, they will get the commission on that sale.
Right.
That's so easy and not so easy, I should say. It makes sense.
It makes
Because
sense. Yeah.
we want to take that time and make a better customer experience. We know that the experience level that people are expecting is moving up. The service level that they expect is moving up, and using the e-commerce portion of this to eliminate the mundane or the things that make it simple, and can be done simply.
Yeah.
It really allows us, like you said, to do the higher value things. And even when you talk about the things like, talked about this with Chris Harrington from Gen Alpha, is that if you have customer service people inside your company, that you can give them better information, like on a part, they're going to order a part for a machine, right? And you go, if the system that you're using can say, yes, you want this bearing, but you then also want this gasket on this side, and you need these bolts because these are replacement items when you do this assembly, that you just did two things. The customer is not going to get out there and try to do what they do, and they're, oh, I need these bolts and that gasket's ruined and I'm screwed now. I got to go back and order that. But you increased your order size.
Yep.
And you made it much easier for the customer service person, the person taking the order, to actually give them high quality suggestions and information.
Yeah. Yes. Well, a few thoughts based on what you said. First, I love Chris Harrington and Gen Alpha, so shout out to them. I agree, she's fabulous, and they're a great group. And also to your point and her point, I think there's a convergence between the digital tools that are being used by end customers and the internal teams at manufacturers and distributors. And we have customers where we set up an e-commerce site for them, and their internal team uses it instead of their other tools because it's easier to look up parts or information or content, which makes sense, right? Like the same kind of things that customers want to do, the internal team needs to do too. So
well, and I've worked with clients before too that they use their internal people use the same way to place orders that the external person would, just because they want to make sure that the experience is good. And with that kind of repetition, you get to stress test. You could do a lot of other things on changes you make. And, I want to change some cart changes or something. You can really see what a difference it makes.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. Because it's just so, it's so exciting when you look at the possibilities of bringing some of these tools into the manufacturing and distribution environment that really allow you to give, just get people what they need and make it easier for everyone to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Good stuff. Well, the one thing that I was going to talk about too, so looking towards the future, what is it that you go, wow, I read about this and it's like, that's going to be super cool.
Oh, there are a lot of really exciting things coming in the future. So there's a lot of talk about personalization technology. And we already talked a little bit about it because, content and product recommendations are actually a part of leveraging machine learning technology to predict what people are going to want to look at. Yeah. But there are some really interesting other ways to use personalization technology where you can be, in some sense, like you can almost be predicting what people are going to want before they tell you, before they really give you any insight into that. And you can leverage that in your email communications with customers. To your point, Damon, those personalized recommendations can go to your sales team, so they can call up customers and say, I think you would be interested in this product. So I think that is pretty fascinating to me, is how that will work. I've also been really interested in chatbots, which I think, so I don't know, some of the chatbots that are out there aren't that great. But I think there's a lot of work being done on them that is really interesting, and I think they're increasingly getting better. Where if they're done right, they can work through some questions with people, and then at a certain point prompt them or move them into a conversation with a real person, but help people get some answers back quickly. So yeah, those are a few of the things that I think are cool out there.
Because if the chat box would work better, I think it would be a really nice solution for a lot of simple questions. But there's just so many you get in, they're just too clunky, and you're always hitting to get to talk to somebody live, especially if you got technical questions. But good stuff. Well, Lori, I'm just so happy to be able to talk with you today, because this is awesome stuff that you get to work on. And of course, this manufacturing and distribution and e-commerce is near and dear to my heart. I just appreciate you taking the time with us today and sharing your knowledge, because it is so much fun to hear what you're doing and learn more from you. So thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. I had so much fun.
You bet. And I want to say thanks, Trish. Another comment. Thanks so much for it. Yeah, we nurturing those relationships is the way to go. That's for sure.
Definitely.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lori, for being here today. We're going to wrap up today for this episode of the Faces of Business. We will be back here again next week with more interesting people talking about business and life. Thanks so much for being here today, everyone.